If you're a founder, a CEO, or someone who is starting a new startup, you know that having that perfect deck is going to make a big difference for your business. This can help you to, get funding for your business, get investors, or maybe even land that brand new client that you need to get your business moving. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I want to share sort of behind the scenes of our thought process when we are designing decks for early stage startups. And I'm not really going to be talking about the sales part of it because I do think we need to leave that for the experts. And I'm going to tag one right here below. Her name is Whitney Sales. I will recommend for you to check out her blog and also her LinkedIn page where she is sharing a lot of content about this. In this video, we're sort of focusing more on the design part of things, on the way that your deck will look like, on the way that you need to present your business so that you can get moving for the next step. So for this video, I thought about breaking it down into two parts. The first one is where we concentrate on what happens before we start to design, which I would really recommend that you do not go ahead and design a deck if you don't have some of the things I'm about to talk about. And then I'm gonna make the second part of this video, which will be more about the design part of things and the aesthetic look of your deck and how you're going to be presenting it. So as I said just now, one of the things that you want to do is that you want to be able to have a clear guideline before you design anything, before you add colors, just sort of like how we do it with a website when we're creating a wireframe, where everything is black and white. We just want to make sure that the content flows. We want to make sure that one slide goes to the next slide and it flows smoothly, just like how a website will flow from section 1 to section 2 to section 3. So at this moment, one of the things that you really need to know, or that we need to know from you, is that we need to make sure that you know what your product is all about, what problem you are solving, and how you're going to make this a lot better for your clients. This way, what we want to do is sort of get a brief explanation of how all of it works so that we can make sure that we have a better idea of your business and how we can break it down into slides. Now that you have this, one of the other things that you really need to figure out is what type of deck are you going to be creating. You see, there are many types of decks and there are also different uses for some of them. You might need something like a pitch deck if you're trying to pitch your business idea to someone new or trying to get a new client. But then there's also certain decks or certain material that you might want to leave with your clients. For example, whenever you are finished with a meeting or with that phone call, you just send this to them. And there can be many other ones. As I said before, make sure to check out some of the blog posts I have linked below where they talk more about all these different decks and all the different usage for them. The other thing that I like to keep in mind when we're designing decks is who we are going to be designing this for. Not just for you as a client or for you as the CEO or the founder, but mainly who you will be talking to. And you see, when we are talking like between ourselves, we tend to talk a lot of tech terms, or sometimes we might even use jargon that we understand because we are experienced in this. But it might be the case that you're talking to a marketing person who has no idea about any tech terms. So if you send them a deck or you're presenting something to them that is very techy, you will lose them right away. So we need to keep in mind who you're designing for so that we can make sure that everything on your deck is quite clear to understand. The next thing that I would recommend to do is before you get to the design part, now that you know who you're talking to, you know what type of deck you're going to be needing, now it is time to write it down, start to put it together. It can be on paper, it can be on a Microsoft Word file, it can just be, actually, if you go to Google Slides, just start to create slides with just black and white content and start to read it. This way you're going to be able to see if it actually makes sense and if the way that these slides flow in actually makes sense as well. Now that we have sort of covered sort of the main thoughts behind a deck, the way that what we have to think about, we can sort of now move into the design part of it, which is what I like the most. So when we are designing a deck, sometimes I've seen clients send us decks that look so different from their brands. And these have already probably been presented. This is something they probably sent someone. And one of the things that we will always recommend that you need to do is make sure that everything that you present that is related to your brand needs to have a similar or a consistent look. Meaning that if someone goes to your website, this website should look like the deck that you're about to send. And also like any other thing that you might find about your brand. This can be on social media, this can be on YouTube, this can be anything else that is related to it. So one of the things I recommend to do if you do not have a brand guidelines is to use this time to create sort of like a guideline where you're going to pick the right colors. You can do some research on different colors if you do not have them yet, on different font types that you're going to use for this deck, and anything else that you have to bring in, like icons or photos that you're going to bring in together into the deck. The other thing that we have to think about is number of slides that you want on your presentation. I know sometimes for certain presentations it is like best practices to keep them between 5 to 7 slides or 5 to 8 and so on, but sometimes depending on the amount of content and the usage of this presentation, what we might want to do is to increase the number of slides but keep the content in each slide a bit smaller. Now for best practices, what I'll recommend is to only have about 100 words per slide. If you do find yourself, like, you know, when you're practicing this presentation, that you find you are rushing through the slides, so like, you know, it feels like you are just going and going and going, one of the things I'll recommend is to throw in something called a breathing slide. And this breathing slide, what it will do is that it will give you a chance to sort of calm down and get back to what you're doing, but it will also give your client or the person you're presenting to sort of like a chance to digest what you have just said. Now the next thing when we are designing something is that we want to also make sure to know how this design is going to be presented. Are you going to go ahead and, you know, do like a normal presentation where you present it on a big screen, or are you going to be doing something on Zoom where sometimes many different screens might have seen the colors of your slide and the photos very different? Or is it something that you're just going to send to your clients on a PDF or anything like that? Because if we are sending them a full design color-based presentation as something that they might want to print, that's going to cost them quite a bit if they have to print quite a few of them. And if you're a CEO, you're a founder, you know that sometimes when you send them a deck, this will be sent to quite a few people. So always keep that in mind. One of the things that you can do is create a fully designed deck with all your colors, with all your photos, and then do sort of more like a black and white version of it, a simpler version that is print friendly. And the next thing I would recommend to do is to try to keep your design minimalistic. There is no need to go ahead and design something that is going to be, you know, futuristic or is going to do anything like that unless your product is actually doing something like that. The reason for us doing this when we're designing is that we do not want to take the attention from the viewer or the person you're sending this to away from what you are seeing, because at the end of the day, if you move the slides away, you should be able to land a new project, you should be able to land a new client or the new investor. So your deck is sort of like a supplement to what you are doing. It helps you to do it, but it should never take the attention from you, the speaker. So these are some of the things that we think about before we start to design a deck. These are the conversations that we have with a client before we design anything. And this is also sort of like the process behind when we start to think about, okay, what colors are we going to add? What sort of images we're going to be creating for this slide? What sort of icons do we need to use? How are we going to choose a layout for this deck? So the question for you though is, how are you designing your decks? Are you going straight into using a tool to design your decks, or are you thinking about all this before you get to design that perfect deck? Let me know by commenting below, and if you have enjoyed this video and you like it, make sure to hit the like button and the bell button so whenever I post another video like this, you get a notification, and I'll see you again in the next video.